When I went to every comic shop in Michigan and then every comic shop in Georgia, I was doing it because I love these shops and I want to make sure they stick around and keep succeeding. But somewhere along the way, I inadvertently became the ultimate authority on local comic shops. You know, as only a 20-something-year-old with no professional experience in the comics industry can become. So I wasn't just going to these shops to buy things and promote the shop, I was also going to give them a rating, so that y'all would know which shops are the best shops in the state according to the Kurt's Comic Review rating. Now, the rating system that I used consisted of 6 categories, all of which I consider to be essential to an excellent comic shop experience, and for each of these categories you could earn a maximum of 5 points, leaving you with an overall total score out of 30 points. And I liked this rating system. I thought it was fair, it looks pretty, it's very similar to Yelp reviews where you get a score out of 5 stars, so now we have 5 stars out of 6 categories. But the problem that I ran into was by the time I gathered all the footage for all the shops in Michigan, it had been a while since I've been to the first one. And since this rating system is a lot of gray area, there's nothing really specific there. It's just whether or not I think it was average or a little above or a little below average or a lot above or a lot below average. It left a lot of room for subjectiveness and fuzzy memory to kind of cloud things over, and by the time I had rated a bunch of the shops in Michigan, I felt like I wasn't really giving them an accurate score. There were also times when I would go through the rubric and then I'd end up with a score that I didn't think accurately reflected how valuable that store was, and then I would kind of fudge the numbers a little bit until it made more sense. So the lack of objectivity in my rubric is a big weak point, I think. The other problem that I have with this rubric is that it gives equal weight to things like back issues and organization. You can earn a maximum of 5 points out of both of those categories, though I think most people would argue that whether or not a shop has good back issues is more important than whether or not it is nicely organized. So while it has been really hard for a shop to earn a full 5 points in new issues, it has been much easier for a shop to earn a full 5 points in oh wow factor or bargain section. And that just doesn't seem fair. So in this video I'm going to show to you and explain to you the new comic shop rubric, and it's going to take a while, but I'm not going to put this information at the beginning of every state video that I do from now on. I'm just going to refer you back to this video where I explain everything in depth. It'll also cut off like 8 minutes from the state videos, which I'm sure nobody will complain about. So here it is, the brand new Kurt's Comic Review local comic shop rubric. You can see that it is still out of 30 points. It is still the same 6 categories, but the points are a little bit different. The first 2 categories, community involvement and back issues, have a maximum of 7 points that they can earn, and the last 4 categories have a maximum of 4 points that they can earn. So even though new issues are the deciding factor of whether or not I consider a shop to be a comic shop, I think that community involvement and back issues are the 2 categories that are most important to creating a comic shop experience. And instead of having a subjective sliding scale between really bad and really fantastic, I have very specific aspects that correlate to each of the point squares in this rubric. So for community involvement, where you can get a maximum of 7 points, there are 7 things that I'm looking for in a comic shop, and they will get a point for each of those things that they have. So let's get right into it. We'll dig into the first category, community involvement. The first thing I'm looking for when it comes to community involvement is whether or not they have artist signings or some kind of mini convention at the shop, or maybe they sponsor a local convention that's nearby. So Augusta Book Exchange down here in Georgia, for example, has an event at least once a year where they have a bunch of local creators come in and set up booths in the shop, and people can shop around and buy prints and stuff. Top Comics in Michigan, I think, is connected to Cherry Con or something like that, and Top Dog Comics here, also in Augusta, is connected to Joe Fest, I think. That's the kind of thing I'm looking for that point. The second point is for a friendly atmosphere. When I walk into the shop, do I have people greeting me? Do I have people that are excited to see me? Is the guy behind the counter mostly ignoring me and then taking forever to ring me up? Or is he cheerful and making recommendations and asking me about what I'm reading? My local shop, Infinite Realities, is insanely positive. The atmosphere in there is like beyond belief positive. It's kind of frightening. We've all had experiences with rude staff at comic shops, and I would be surprised if people give me a bad experience when I come in, knowing that I'm there to film them and put it on YouTube. But sometimes it happens, and if it does happen, they will not get that point. A shop will get the next point if they host something like game nights or a book club. I much prefer it if they host some kind of book club so people can read like a graphic novel together and then come and talk about it, but it's much more common for a shop to host game nights because a lot of comic shops have to also do do games, and a lot of people need people to game with. The point is the shop is giving customers an opportunity to come into the shop and enjoy the products that the shop is selling together and create that sense of community. Like the gaming space in Perfect Storm Comics and Paw Paw and also Battle Creek in Michigan is really great. A shop will earn the next point if they specifically have a place where people can just hang out. We're talking chairs, couches, coffee table, a place where you can just chill and read a book. Sentinel Comics in Columbus, Georgia has not one, but 2, 3, I think 4 spots where you can just hang out in the shop. And I think that's important for the community aspect of a comic shop. The next point, this one is very important. A shop will earn this point if they have a public restroom. I cannot tell you how many times I go to a comic shop expecting to spend multiple hours there, and then nature calls and they tell me they don't have a bathroom and I have to go to find a gas station or a McDonald's or something, and it wastes a ton of my time and it's just not fun. And look, I'm sure that every comic shop that does not have their own restroom has had problems with it in the past, because let's be honest, sometimes we're kind of messy guys, you know it. But darn it, I have been known to go across the street to a grocery store to buy a plunger for the shop that I was just at because it's the right thing to do. So I think that having a public restroom is just part of making it a comfortable community experience. This next point is a little bit tricky. This one is for unique shop flavor. So if I'm in that comic shop, is it very clear that I am in that comic shop, or could it just be pretty much any comic shop? Shops come to mind like Green Brain Comics in Dearborn, where everything is painted purple and green and all the decorations are related to the Green Brain, or Sentinel Comics again in Columbus, where they literally have a giant sentinel in the shop, or even Rebel Sanctuary in, I think, Manistee, where they have the nice paintings on the wall of the town and of Lake Michigan, so it's very clear that you're in a Lake Michigan coastline town. So this point has a lot to do with branding and sticking to theme, like Galactic Quest down here in Georgia has Galaxy Man. You see a picture of Galaxy Man in a shop and you know that you are in a Galactic Quest. I think that most shops are not going to get this point, and that's okay. There are definitely a lot of other things to focus on, but I want to make sure a shop is rewarded for putting in all this extra effort. And the last point you can earn in community involvement is whether or not you are promoting children's literacy. And this one can be pretty tricky to earn. I think that most shops are not going to get this point, but there are some shops that go out of their way to get comics and books into the hands of kids, which is something I'm very passionate about and something that I think every comic shop should be passionate about. But it's two different things to have an owner say that they're passionate about it and to have a shop as an entity working to actually promote children's literacy. Like the owner of Savannah Comics here in Georgia hands out comic books instead of candy on Halloween, or the owner of Galactic Quest goes on a library tour to talk to kids about comic books. Things like that. Things that go beyond just recommending a good comic to a kid when they come into your store. So that's community involvement. You can get a maximum of 7 points out of that category if you're doing all of these things, which most shops are not doing. Next, we move on to the category of back issues, which is one of the categories that I receive the most complaints about in the comment section on my videos. And that's because it can be really hard to figure out how to grade back issues, because there are so many back issues out there. I don't want to punish shops that haven't been around for 30 years collecting those issues. I want to make sure that new shops have the opportunity to earn just as many points as the older shops. So here are the 7 things that I'm specifically looking for when it comes to back issues. A shop will earn the first point if you are likely to find a specific issue that you're looking for. So on this last tour of Georgia, I didn't tell any of the shop owners to prepare them, but I was specifically looking for issues of Alpha Flight, which is not the most common back issue ever, but it's also definitely not rare. So I should reasonably expect to find at least a few issues of Alpha Flight at pretty much every shop I go to. If I can walk into a shop looking for issue 209 of Avengers and find it quickly, that shop is great. And I can already hear the shop owners saying, well, what if somebody just bought that issue 2 weeks ago? Am I supposed to already have gone out and found another one and processed it and put it in the bin and priced it and everything? That's so much work. I already have all this other inventory that I need to sell. Why would I be prioritizing other inventory that just sold? If there's anybody who's going to complain about how much hard work it is to have great back issues, well, I'm sorry to say that excellence involves hard work. If you want to have a truly excellent comic shop that earns all the points, you got to do some hard work. A shop will earn the next point if you are likely to find comics you've never heard of. So not just a specific issue that you were looking for, but if you stumble across something new that you've never seen before, which you should be able to find because nobody has seen every single comic, there's just way too many comics out there, then the shop will earn that point. Doesn't have to be rare, doesn't have to be valuable, just has to be obscure and expected expand your perspective of the comics industry. A shop will earn the next point if they have an extensive trade paperback section. I didn't award any points for trade paperbacks in the last 2 states, and I think that was a serious oversight because most new fans of the medium don't want to read single issues all the time. They want to get a trade paperback and read a bunch of them all at once. So even though trade paperbacks are not as much of a sensual experience as the single issues are, I think that they count towards back issues, and if you have a lot of trade paperbacks, then you'll get the point. If you have one little bookshelf like this big with trade paperbacks on it, not good enough. The next point is your back issues are priced to sell, not impress. I have been to so many comic shops that have back issues that are just ridiculously high priced, and sometimes it's okay because the comic shop is way removed from the rest of civilization and it's just hard to get comics out there. But if I can regularly find issue 223 of Uncanny X-Men for $1 at a bunch of comic shops, I'm definitely not going to pay $7 or $8 for it at any comic shop. I know some comic shops base their pricing on the Overstreet pricing guide, and that's okay, but I don't care. Call me old-fashioned, but I've been to hundreds of comic book shops, and I know what a dollar book looks like. Now, this doesn't mean they have to be dirt cheap. I still want a shop to make their markup on it so they can stay in business. We're talking around the $2, $3, maybe $4 mark for most regular back issues. I specifically do not like it when I see new issues that came out last month raised by 50 cents or $1 when they're put into the back issue bin. New comics are like cars. Once you drive them off the new issue stand, they are not worth that price anymore. The next point comes from being priced clearly. I cannot stand it when I can't find a price tag on a comic, so you bring it up to the counter and then they have to say, oh, I don't know, let me check eBay really quick. No, I'm not playing that game. If I wanted to buy it for eBay price, I would have bought it off eBay. My favorite comic book shops have the price tag in the top corner on a bag and board where you can easily see it just casually flipping through the issues. I don't want to have to pull a comic out of the box and turn it around and then flip it upside down and then read something that's in Sharpie or pencil. I want to see a price tag clear on the front. That's just a pet peeve of mine though. The real issue of this point is whether or not they have a price on them, and I don't have to go up to the counter to check with the price. The next point comes from your back issues being organized. I want to see them alphabetical. I want to see them having divider tabs that are labeled. I want to see that volume 1 of Spider-Man is not mixed in with volume 5, all out of order. Venom and Carnage series do not belong mixed in with Spider-Man issues. They belong in the Venom section and the Carnage section, labeled likewise. I know we talk about them a lot, but Sentinel Comics has everything beautifully organized with custom divider tabs by each volume of the series. Oh, it's beautiful. Another pet peeve of mine is when back issues are squished together really tight, so the packs and boards are getting all wrinkly, pressing up against each other, and you have to take out a stack of like 30 of them and set them aside and hope you don't drop them all over the floor when they're slippery. And then you have to somehow squeeze them back in without getting any of the comics bent underneath each other. Ooh, that's my worst nightmare. But I know that some people don't mind that, so I'm not specifically going to give or take a point based on how jam-packed the boxes are. The last point a shop can receive in back issues comes from most key issues being available. We're not talking first appearance of Superman here. We're not even talking first appearance of Spider-Man here. We're talking first appearance of Wolverine, first appearance of Venom, first appearance of Miles Morales, maybe some keys from the 60s like First Galactus. This is directly related to whether or not you're likely to find a specific issue. If you can walk into a shop looking for the first appearance of Miles Morales and they have it, then you'll get this point. Doesn't have to be boxes and boxes and boxes of graded keys that are taking up a ton of space. It just has to be like a couple dozen, at least a couple dozen of the most common ones. So like I said, back issues and community involvement are my 2 most important categories for a local comic shop, so they have a maximum of 7 points you can earn. Moving on to the next category, which is new issues, you can only earn a maximum of 4 points. Now the first point a shop can earn for new issues comes from whether or not their selection ranges from mainstream to very obscure. Now it doesn't count if you just have all of Marvel and DC and then whatever Mark Miller and James Tynion IV are writing at Image Comics. We're talking selection from Boom, Dynamite, IDW, Mad Cave, Solar, Dark Horse, Scout, Oni, and the dozens of other publishing companies out there. There are so many comics coming out every week, and there are very few shops I go to where I see a significant selection of comics that I had no idea existed. Vault of Midnight in Ann Arbor comes to mind for having great new issue selection. Fanfare Comics in Kalamazoo comes to mind for having great new issue selection. Very obscure means very obscure. A shop will receive the next point if their new issues are labeled with staff picks and short descriptions. This is specifically what held a lot of people back in Michigan and Georgia from receiving full 5 points on new issues because some shops go above and beyond and put this employee's pick of the week and this employee's pick of the week, and then a little description of the series, like in Beneath the Trees we have a Dexter-esque serial killer story mixed with the fuzzy animal story to create a great contrast of mood. Neighborhood Comics in Savannah does this, My Parents' Basement in Avondale Estates does this, it's great. The next point comes from new issues of the week being easy to find. If you specifically have the new issues that came out that week separated from the rest of the new issues that came out over the last couple months, that makes it so much easier. I don't love going to comic shops and having to look at this giant wall of things that have come out over the past few months and having to figure out which one of these I might have missed maybe last week or which one came out today. Sometimes a shop will have a tag under that series that says new this week, and they'll just have every issue of that series behind the latest issue, but they're all mixed in on the wall, and that's okay. But what I really want to see is a whole separate section where you can see just the stuff that came out this week. And then the last point you can earn for new issues is something that maybe should have gone in the community involvement, but I think it's okay in the new issue section. That is whether or not they have a local creator section. Criminal Records here in Atlanta, for example, has a fantastic local creator section. There's probably dozens of titles that you can get by people here in Georgia. And that's all 4 points you can earn for new issues. Now let's move on to bargain section, which is my favorite category because I'm cheap. A shop will earn the first point if the majority of the store is priced to sell. So if the whole shop is reasonably priced, and I'm not getting sticker shock everywhere I look in the shop except for their dollar bins, then they will earn this point. A shop that comes to mind is Galaxy's Most Wanted in, I think, Flat Rock, Michigan. Pretty much everything in that shop was at least a little bit discounted, and some of it was really discounted. It was very reasonable pricing on everything in there. The next point comes from having quality items for $1 or less. So you're not guaranteed this point if you have dollar bins. It has to be relatively decent dollar bins. A lot of the dollar bins I've seen and the 50-cent bins and the quarter bins are just the garbage that they can't get rid of over the course of like 30 years. And I don't love digging through 90s stuff that never sold in the first place and it's getting beat up because it's not in bags and boards and they're still expecting $1 for each issue. What makes a good dollar section is that there's actually some value in there. Most of my collection came out of dollar bins. And it doesn't have to be the most gorgeous condition ever to be considered quality. It just has to be something worth reading, something worth collecting. Not 12 copies of issue 3 of Youngblood that nobody is ever going to care about. If somebody can walk into the store with $3 and walk out with more than one thing, you're golden. The next point comes from promotional discounts. So maybe something seasonal where you're doing like 25% off on your back issues or 25% off on action figures, or you have like a buy 3 get 1 free sale on your back issues. Like Time Travelers in Michigan has a bigger and bigger price break depending on how many back issues you buy at once. That's the kind of thing I'm looking for. And then the last point a shop can earn in this category is for variety of bargain items. So not just dollar or 50-cent bins. Do you also have some pocketbooks? Do you also have some Hot Wheels cars? Do you also have some older trade paperbacks like this copy of the Uncanny X-Men that I have 3 copies of now because I keep finding it for super cheap? Could I get a really old Transformer who may or may not be missing his head for like $1 and have a piece of history for not much money? I got this Pogo book from 1960 from the Comic Signal in Michigan for looks like $12, which is a pretty good deal. So that's what I mean by variety of bargain items, not just dollar bins. If a shop only has dollar bins, even if they have $30 bins, you won't get that point. The next category a shop can earn points in is oh wow factor. We have a maximum of 4 points in this one as well, and I think before I had been to all the shops in Michigan and Georgia, I would not have been able to be more objective about this because it's just so hard to know what's out there that's worth these points. But after going to all these shops, the first opportunity for a point that a shop has is whether or not they have a giant decoration. Like A to Z Comics in Michigan has a giant Hulk statue, or Urban Pop Comics in Ackworth has a giant Silver Surfer statue, or Battlegrounds in Georgia has a giant pile of old toys and stuff at the front of the shop that looks really cool. And some shop owners might be saying, well, my shop isn't very big, how am I supposed to get a giant decoration in there? Well, Comicade in Michigan has a really cute Batman hunting the Man-Bat and a bat signal kind of hanging from their ceiling, and it looks really cool, but it doesn't take up a lot of space, and I think that that would count. A shop will earn the next point if they have very rare items, like Neighborhood Comics in Savannah, Georgia has a Swedish issue of Batman from the 60s, which I think is super cool. At Galactic Quest, again, I was shown what is supposedly the oldest comic shop in history, which is the Obadiah Sawbuck or whatever. So something very rare that it is just not possible for every comic shop to have. The next point comes from very unique items, so something that really only that shop can have. Like Sentinel Comics very specifically ordered that giant Sentinel bust in the shop, or Top Comics in Michigan very specifically built that R2-D2 that they have in their shop. If somebody had one of the helmets that Captain America wore when he was riding his motorcycle in the Captain America show or movie or whatever from the 70s, that would count. And then the last point that a shop can earn in this category is just random element. There are still things that I can't be objective about when it comes to oh wow factor, because sometimes you walk into a shop and you find yourself saying oh wow at something you just wouldn't expect to say that for. So this random element is kind of the catch-all. Like maybe for Tardy's Underground Comics in Michigan, I would have given them this point for their bathroom, which is incredibly decorated. So I've done my best to quantize oh wow factor, but as far as the categories go, it is the one that is least objective. And then finally, that brings us to the last category, which is organization, which, as I've said many times before, I don't really care if a shop is totally disorganized and out of sorts and dirty. Some of my favorite shops are the ones where I can dig through piles of things that have been forgotten over the decades and I can find a really good deal on something really old and dusty. But that's a matter of personal preference, and I don't believe that that indicates a truly excellent comic shop. So the first opportunity for a point in organization is whether or not everything is clearly labeled. The first shop that comes to mind when I think about this is Heroes and Villains in Warner Robins, where they had literally everything labeled. They were in love with their signs, and I love that. I don't want to walk up to a box of comics and see that some of them have prices on them and some of them don't, but there's nothing written on the box, there's no sign at the back of the box, it's just a mystery and I have to go and ask somebody about it. So put labels on things, put signs on things, make sure people know what they are looking at. A shop will get the next point if all of their inventory is accessible. Now, having back issues that are super crammed in there kind of falls into this category, but mostly we're talking about, do I have to move a giant stack of comics to get into this box of back issues? Is there a stack of 3 long boxes right on top of each other and the back issue that I want is all the way at the back of the box on the bottom of that? Now I have to move all of those and put them in the aisleway, which was already skinny, and people are mad at me because I'm taking up a ton of space because I need that issue of Batman. I love Time Travelers, and the previous owner, Mike, was a great guy, but he would get really irritated when I would ask him for that Star Wars board game that was up on a shelf 10 feet up and underneath 8 other board games, and he'd have to kind of jimmy it out of there without making all the other ones fall down. But look, you kind of did this to yourself. I want that thing, and I'm sorry that you didn't make that thing accessible. A shop will earn the next point if their sections are clearly defined. So I want to make sure that it's obvious the back issues are here, the dollar issues are here, the trade paperbacks are here. If I have to go here and there to find back issues, that's not really clearly defined. That's not all that organized. In the case of Bizarro Wuxtree in Athens, Georgia, they just have so many back issues that they literally need multiple rooms to put them all out. But at least they are well labeled and they are all at a good height for browsing, so that's fine. But there shouldn't be like 3 tables covered in long boxes and the first 5 long boxes are dollar books, and then you have like 1 box of 50-cent books and then you have more dollar books. That just doesn't make sense. And then the last point that a shop can earn for organization is whether or not the shop is well lit and clean. So when you walk into the shop, do you feel like you're walking into a place of business that's bright and cheerful, or are you walking into like a 19th century opium den? And look, I'm an animal person. I love it when I walk into a shop and they have a dog or a cat that's just chilling and you can hang out with that animal. That's great. But if you're not cleaning up after that animal, if there's hair everywhere, if it kind of smells like cat pee somewhere, then you're definitely not going to get that point. If you're bringing your animal into your shop, you are committing to keeping your shop clean even though there's an animal there. It's especially nice if a shop is getting lots of natural sunlight, but I know that most shop owners can't control that. They don't have a ton of control over what building they can get. But as long as the shop is well lit, it's bright, it's welcoming, they're going to get that point. So that's the new rubric. You have the same amount of points, you have the same categories, it's just a different distribution of points that I think will be more fair and more accurately reflect a truly excellent shop. Now what I need to do is go back and change everybody's score, which I'm sure is going to make some people really grumpy, and it's going to make some people care even less than they cared before. But that's okay, because we need to consider the integrity of the Kurt's Comic Review local comic shop rubric. I dream of a world where shops that earn 25 points or higher receive a gold plaque they can place on their wall saying that Kurt's Comic Review deems this shop truly excellent. I also dream of the day where some kind website developer will help me make a website for the channel where we can have an interactive map that shows all of the places I've been, and when you click on them you can see a lot of details about it and the clip from the video that shows that shop. So if anybody's out there that's interested in that, let me know. Thanks for watching, thanks for supporting your local comic shop. I'm Kurt Williams, and you are somebody else.